Paul, you're mute.
Okay, so we're gonna start. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all who is with us in this Zoom webinar. This is A Voice to Peoples, the People's Tribunal, and the Fight for Justice and Self-Determination from West Papua to the Philippines. I am Paul Belisario, the Global Coordinator for the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, IPM-SDL, a global movement of indigenous peoples, communities, organizations, and movements and their allies and advocates. And today, as we have said, this is a exciting discussion and exchange on the People's Tribunal and the fight for justice and self-determination in West Papua and in the Philippines. Before we start, let me just introduce to you our esteemed panel of speakers and of course our moderator for today. So today we have a very esteemed speakers, dearest friends, close friends to IPM-SDL, to the Indigenous Peoples Movement, and our members, some of our closest allies in our struggle for indigenous peoples and self-determination. First, we have here Ms. Samira Humerang Saunders. She's a researcher from the Center for Climate Crime and Climate Justice, a center based at Queen Mary University of London, which provides educational resources and publishes researches to hold climate offenders accountable. Her research focuses on the environmental destruction of war on Gaza and neo-colonial dynamics in the South Pacific. And she is also the co-founder of the project Archive Plus, a photo project which aims to renegotiate the visual narratives of people of Papua New Guinea. Hello, Samira. We also have here Eufemia Colyamat. Eufemia Colyamat is an indigenous Lumad from Mindanao in the Philippines. She's the spokesperson of Sandugo movement of Moro in Indigenous Peoples for Self-Determination. And she is also from Kalumaran, the Alliance of Indigenous Lumad in Mindanao. She also served as a representative in the Philippine Congress under the Bayan Muna party list. She is known for her strong stance against militarization, exploitation of ancestral lands, and destructive mining practices. Hello, Eufemia. We also have here, happy to be with us, Victor Yemo, the spokesperson of the West Papua National Committee, KNPB, advocating for self-determination and independence of West Papua. He is a very vocal critic of the military presence and human rights abuses in the region. He was arbitrarily arrested in 2021 and charged with treason for a peaceful protest and demonstration against racial discrimination in Indonesia. But he was released, and after he was discharged of all these charges in 2020. So we are happy to have here Victor. We also have here, happy to join us, Papang Hidayat from TAPOL UK, a researcher from TAPOL. TAPOL is a campaign organization campaigning for human rights, peace, and democracy in Indonesia. Their center is based in UK with members in Indonesia and different parts, working on raising awareness of human rights issues in Indonesia, including West Papua. They are founded on grassroots campaigning, working closely with local organizations in Indonesia, advocating for truth and justice, and encouraging the international community to take action. Hello, Papang.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Paul.
We also have here, thank you, Papang, Evie Garcia. Evie Garcia is the global coordinator of the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, or FFPS. The Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle is an alliance, global alliance, supporting the movement for genuine democracy, freedom, and national and social liberation in the Philippines. Hello, Evie. Good evening to you. And of course, we have our friend Peter Murphy. Peter Murphy is the chairperson of ICHIRP, or the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. ICHIRP is a global network of organizations concerned about the human rights situation in the Philippines and committed to campaign for just and lasting peace in the country. It operates, ICHIRP is in 15 countries with more than 50 members organizations across the world. Hello, Peter. I know it's very early where you are.
No, it's good. It's lunchtime here in Sydney. Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone.
So that's our panel, and to moderate us, to guide us, and to help us to listen to these stories, to the journey of these tribunals and the stories of our speakers and panel. We have here our very own, of course, the co-convener of the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, and also the national convener of Katribu, the National Alliance of Indigenous Peoples in the Philippines, Beverly Long. Hi, Beverly. I turn the mic to you. Okay, so again, we request everyone to utilize the chat for your questions, inputs, solidarity messages, links, or resources. We will utilize the chat later on after the panel discussion. We will try to entertain as much of the questions as we can. And also for the panel, please try to speak slowly and clearly so that our interpreters can catch all your words. Okay. Uh, Over to you, Beverly.
Hello, thank you, Paul. Warm greetings to everybody. So I'll be moderating the panel discussion today. So for everybody, last May 2024, this year, the International Peoples Tribunal, or IPT, on war crimes in the Philippines was held in Brussels. And then the following month, in June 2024, the Permanent Peoples Tribunal, PPT, was also convened to hear the case of the state and environmental violence in West Papua. In both the tribunals, indigenous peoples played an important part, highlighting their quest, their fight for justice and recognition of our right to land and self-determination. So today, in this session, we hope to promote, and bring awareness on the situation and struggles of the Filipino peoples and the peoples of West Papua, with special attention to indigenous peoples. We also hope that through this webinar, we are able to promote a deeper understanding on the importance, the overview of these processes, IPT and PPT, and the outcomes of these tribunals to the wider public, and of course to the specifically to the peoples in the Philippines and West Papua. Hopefully, from the discussion, we will also be able to see if there are comparative views, arising from the verdict and the processes of both tribunals, and look into the participation of the peoples affected themselves into these processes. And lastly, to look into what will be the perspectives. So how can the people's movements or advocates for the rights of the Filipino people and West Papua use the verdict? How important is this? So without further ado, because we have set a short time, maybe I'd like to ask Evie and Samira, being the co-conveners of both tribunals, can you explain to us what is this IPT, the International Peoples Tribunal on War Crimes in the Philippines, and what is this Permanent Peoples Tribunal on the State and Environmental Violence in West Papua. Is there a difference between the titles of both tribunals? So, Evie, Samira? Or maybe Samira can go first and then Evie can follow.
Sure. Hi everyone, good morning or afternoon. So the Tribunal on State and Environmental Violence in West Papua was the 53rd session of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal. In terms of difference between the titles, the Permanent Peoples Tribunal is an international body that is now based in Rome, that was established in 1979. In general, it's an opinion tribunal aimed at shedding light on causes that often go unheard or cases of human rights violations that the current international legal framework fails to meaningfully address. So it is an external body. And our tribunal took place over 3 days this past June at Queen Mary University of London with a panel of 7 judges who heard from a really wide array of witnesses and resource witnesses who spoke to the many and interconnected forms of state violence and environmental degradation that takes place there.
Okay, thanks, Samira. Evie?
Hi, thank you. So similarly, the International Peoples Tribunal, it had a number of jurors composed of the general public who have also specific knowledge on the issue of human rights and international law. And so the main difference of a People's Tribunal is that it's really it has the mandate of the people, so very different from traditional mechanisms that we know in our court systems that are usually quite susceptible also to influence of imperialist powers. The People's Tribunal really draws its strength and its value from being organized by the people and giving the people a forum to pursue justice.
So since both forums were practically outside of the traditional justice system of the Philippines and West Papua, and as Samira mentioned, is an opinion tribunal, but what is very important is it is the people themselves, no, participating in this tribunal. Can you walk us through the contents of the indictment and what was the process in coming out with a verdict as far as the tribunal is concerned? So, Evie, maybe we could go with you first.
Okay, sure. So for the IPT, the indictment was charging the former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and also the current president, Ferdinand Marcos, also the entire government of the Republic of the Philippines, and then also the US President Joe Biden and the United States of America with war crimes or violations of international humanitarian law. So it was based upon very extensive evidence and reflects years of mounting atrocities that have already gone unpunished. So there's quite a long list of charges, but some of them are, for example, the killing and abduction and torture of civilians, hamletting and displacement of entire communities, killing of persons who are no longer able to fight or who do not perform combat functions, and attacks on or cruel treatment of peace consultants from the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, the NDFP, which is the National Liberation Movement in the Philippines. And so there was a number of key witnesses who were able to attest to these crimes, and who really left a very deep impact actually on everyone that was present, and not only because of the horrors that they endured, but also because of the courage that they really displayed. And all of these violations of IHL, they were that were presented in a tribunal, they were committed in the context of the armed conflict that is ongoing in the Philippines between the NDFP on the one hand, and on the other hand, the government of the Republic of the Philippines, which is actually aided and supported by the US government. So I think maybe also good to mention is why also the government of the US was charged and found guilty is because both Marcos Jr. and Rodrigo Duterte represent the interests not only of the Philippine ruling class, but also of US imperialism. And the brutal counterinsurgencies that both have resorted to were directly supported by the US government. So for example, the US remains the main supplier of weapons used by the Philippine administrations. Over $2 billion in arms sales have been approved under the Marcos Jr. regime alone. And additionally, there's a new, under the new Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, the US has pledged an additional $500 million per year for military aid. And next to that, it has also been directly involved in training Philippine military units that were responsible. For example, there's a unit that was responsible for the war crime, such as the torture of and killing of Vilma and Benito Tiamson, who are both PIF consultants of the NDFP. So through these military aid and training, the US really exerts significant influence over the Philippine military hierarchy. So to shortly summarize, the tribunal also became very important venue to expose the US's complicity in the counterinsurgency operations and to also bring international attention to these war crimes, highlighting also the ongoing struggle of the Filipino people for national liberation.
Okay, thank you, Evie. I'll get back to you on the guilty verdict later on because I'd like to hear also from Samira first.
Yeah, so the indictment for the PPT was made up of 4 charges that were all brought against the government of Indonesia. And I'm just going to quickly read them out because I think the phrasing is an important point I'd like to draw attention to. So the first is the Indonesian state has taken the ancestral land of the indigenous Papuan people against their will, using racial discrimination and leading to the loss of culture, traditions, and indigenous knowledge. The second is the Indonesian state is accused of violent repression, including unlawful detention, extrajudicial killing, and population displacement in West Papua as a means of furthering industrial development. The third is the Indonesian state has organized environmental degradation, including the destruction of ecosystems, contamination of land, the poisoning of rivers and their tributaries, and of providing the permits, concessions, and legal structure of non-compliance for national and foreign companies to invest in West Papua in a way that encourages environmental degradation. And the last one is the Indonesian state is colluding with national and foreign companies to cause environmental degradation, population displacement, and sustain violent repression in West Papua. So what we found when writing this indictment was that the forms of environmental degradation in West Papua are inseparable from the forms of physical violence that the people are subject to. Hence why the phrasing of the charges combines these 2 issues. Firstly, West Papua is home to the 3rd largest rainforest in the world after the Amazon and the Congo, and that makes it entirely relevant to the sustainability of life for all of us. But also, when you're applying legal language to situations that are causing deep ruptures in indigenous cosmologies, it means that you have to take very seriously this deep interconnectedness that many indigenous people share with their land. So the destruction of land is equal to the destruction of self and identity. And that's kind of how we arrived at this indictment in this form, attempting to join these 2 concepts together so that one is not presented as necessarily more important than the other.
Okay. Thank you, Evie and Samira. I'd like to ask some questions with Femia and Victor, but I would just like to look into the opinion of our endorsers. I understand that TAPOL and ICHR both endorse this process, this tribunal. So maybe one after the other, Victor, Peter, and Papang, can you give us why is this important? Why is it important for organizations like yours to be able to support this tribunal and bring in the indictment that Evie and Samira just explained, especially highlighting the interconnection between this political repression and the issue of economic issues and now the issue of the environment and the ecological destruction. So maybe Papang, then Peter.
Thank you, Beverly. So I think the PPT on West Papua is very important because it's not a usual platform for us, for the Indonesia and West Papuan human rights community to voice out our human rights concern in the region. We usually participated in the conventional one using the various UN human rights mechanism. But this one is a special one. So we want to test also our allegation on serious and systematic human rights violation and environmental degradation in West Papua, whether it's confirmed from different platform and it has a proof like that. The second thing, of course, the human rights communities in Indonesia and West Papua also appreciated the initiative from this unconventional platform because it confirmed that the international solidarity is still very strong on West Papua issues, where the state of Indonesia, they organize a very systematic and expensive smear campaign against what happened in West Papua. It's highlighted by the remark coming from our current president. He said that no problem in West Papua. 99% of the territory is safe and secure. But we counter this narrative like this. That's the main reason why TAPOL and other national human rights NGOs and also within the West Papuan human rights community, we were very eagerly joined this initiative.
Okay.
I think that's for the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Papang. I would assume that this was quite a difficult process to bring in all of these witnesses and jurors together. Let's hear from Peter also from the experience of the IPT.
Thank you very much, Beverly. I think it's important to start by saying that the event was very well attended, mainly by Filipino people in Brussels. So there was a sort of a vibrant dynamic between the lawyers, the witnesses, and this audience and the jurors. Overall, the IPT added to the body of evidence which we want to use in any future legal actions against perpetrators of war crimes against the Filipino people. And it was an important new platform for us in our efforts to educate the international community about the reality of the situation of people's rights in the Philippines today. So the verdict was guilty, of course. The verdict showed or affirmed the view of our organizations that we have to expose the misinformation and deception of the current Marcos Jr. regime. So in the lead up to the May 2022 elections, Marcos Jr. conducted a really huge misinformation campaign, especially on social media through TikTok and other widely available social media platforms in the Philippines. And he was promoting the idea that his father's brutal regime back in the 1970s and 80s was a golden era of the Philippines. And he's attempted by this type of campaign to erase the actual history of the horrors of the martial law era and somehow sanitize his family's image. And this, of course, is aimed at neutralizing antagonism from the international community that had developed against his predecessor, Duterte. So in 2022, ICHRP organized an international observer mission to those elections in May that year, and we gathered evidence demonstrating that the election in which Marcos Jr. came to power was neither free nor fair. It didn't meet international standards. Over the course of the elections, ICHRP documented widespread vote buying, failures in the electronic vote counting machines, harassment and intimidation, political arrests and detention, and many, many incidents of deadly violence. And in response to this work we put out, the state forces in the Philippines lashed back. They red tagged members of our observers as terrorist supporters and tried to intimidate them by putting up banners of them in public saying that they were terrorist supporters. Even during this last week, just now, one of the people who went as an international election observer, Copeland Downs, was refused entry when he landed at Manila Airport. This was based, his rejection at the airport was based on a false claim that he took part in a rally in 2022. It's a factual error, in fact, and it's an act of retaliation for his participation in the IOM. Of course, we don't believe that even if he took part in a rally in 2022, that there's a reason to not allow him to visit the Philippines. In addition to Marcos Jr.'s deceptions in that election campaign, he's been trying to win global support from foreign governments. So he's become known as the jet-setting president. He's traveling many times to foreign state visits, as well as really personal indulgences like Formula One racing events or concerts and so on. He's tried to distance himself from Duterte, and he acts as if he's holding some kind of higher standard of human rights than Duterte did. And this is to help him search for millions of dollars in foreign investments, military aid, and weapons for the Philippines. The IPT brought to the front the military realities of the US-designed counterinsurgency campaign in the Philippines and the terrible damage it does to individuals and communities, largely away from the eyes of the media and international observers. The record of the IPT can be used to tell the people's story, to expose the false narrative of anti-terrorism and anti-communism coming from governments in Manila and Washington. All across the globe, as gross violations of human rights and international law mount, we can point to the evidence and the verdict of the IPT and how these war crimes continue. We can counter the narratives of Marcos Jr., his regime, and raise to his foreign supporters the realities of the situation in the Philippines. Just briefly, if I can go into this, that the counterinsurgency operations by the Philippine Army and police results in the deaths of hundreds of civilians, including the massacre of entire families, even children, members of rural and indigenous communities, land rights defenders, and other progressive activists. The armed forces of the Philippines carries out indiscriminate attacks through airstrikes, artillery shelling in areas with civilian infrastructure, households and schools. Heavy and incessant bombardment led to the forced displacement of more than 500,000 people nationwide during Duterte's administration and into the first 2 years of Marcos Jr. In numerous well-documented incidents throughout the country, army units killed members of the New People's Army who had already been rendered incapable of combat or to combat, as illustrated by the massacre of 5 New People's Army fighters in Bilyar, Bohol province. Under the Marcos Jr. administration, there's also been a steady rise in the cases of abduction and enforced disappearances perpetrated by security forces. And while this is happening, foreign governments all over the world have been pouring millions and billions into the Marcos Jr. regime. So we really want to vigorously mount a campaign using the results of the IPT to oppose this military aid that goes to war crimes in the Philippines.
Okay.
So,
Thank you,
thank you.
Peter,
Yeah.
for that, and Papang. I would agree, especially in the case of West Papua, that really the most vicious and brutal violations are not really brought to the attention of the wider global community. And I hope that really with the popularization of the indictment and the PPT verdict, we'll be able to bring more attention and at the same time bring more solidarity. So like I've mentioned that an important part of both tribunals is the role of Indigenous peoples, no, and the issues confronted by Indigenous peoples. And we are glad that we have two who are from the grassroots themselves and victims themselves of state and corporate attacks and violence. So uh, Euphemia, and Victor are here. Both of you spoke in the tribunal. Both of you were witnesses in the tribunal. Can you give us a summary of what you shared in this tribunal and why you think it is important for Kalumaran and KNPB to participate and actively engage this tribunal? Maybe we can go with Victor first and then followed by Femi.
Thank you, Beverly. Yes, I think today for the people of West Papua, this is the significant victory that the success of the Permanent Peoples Tribunal in London, because for the people of West Papua, through these tribunals, they all has witnessed the realities of the operation in West Papua, of the deforestation in West Papua, of the cruel grip of militarization in West Papua. So for me, this is the success for the tribunal, for the PPT, for the people like me in the ground to make voice in PPT. And I have just sent, and I have just read the summary of the PPT, and it is very powerful for us, where the PPT also continue to call the United Nations the UN Human Rights Commission to send a mission to West Papua. This is the demand that cannot be ignored for me, for us, not only for West Papua, but for international communities. So our participation in this PPT, this is we explore all the situation in West Papua, start from 1962, where indigenous and Polynesian people live under oppression and exploitation. As already mentioned by PPT, that West Papua became an emergency of genocide, ecocide, and ethnocide caused by the militarization, corporate exploitation, and the settler occupation. Yes, West Papua has been fighting for their independence since 1914. The conflict in West Papua cannot be stopped without the decolonization process for West Papuans. So West Papuans believe that their case is an unfinished business of decolonization, and that the UN need to intervene to resolve the issue. There are many pressing issues in West Papua where we can see, start from 2018, there are armed conflict conducted in West Papua by Indonesian military. There are huge military operation going on in the ground. More than, I think Human Rights Monitor also mentioned that more than 28,000 people spread across several regions. Adding the current IDPs from Panya, 1,400 since the conflict started in June in 2020. 2024. The government also in Indonesia also continuously restrict the right of the indigenous Papuans to express their opinion, especially political opinion in West Papua, as well as the right of peaceful assembly. Also, the freedom of media in West Papua has been restricted. Many Indonesian journalists and foreign journalists were obstructed and attracted by the members of the forces. And also in the population in West Papua, we are in the dangerous situation where population in 2022, according to national statistics, are 5 million, more than 5 million. And indigenous Papuans are only 2.9 millions, where non-Papuans more than us now. So Papua believe in reality in the population of non-Papuan are higher based on the number of migration to Papuan are 6.39% every year coming to West Papua. So in the genocide, or I mentioned, we are in the dangers now. On the eco side, the West Papuan huge and massive loss, I think it's already mentioned by all the NGOs. Mentioned that deforestation in West Papua, according to the Indonesian Central Bureau of Statistics, where Papuan covers around 36% of the total forest area of Indonesia, where West Papuan forest is largest compared with other region in Indonesia, but then already being lost in West Papua. This is the very crucial issue where Indonesia President of Jokowi already opened new 1 million hectares of the palm sugar in Merauke. I think this is the very present situation in West Papua, but demilitarization in West Papua is more danger, where our Kiwi pilot being after released by our guerrillas, our combatant in West Papua, the Indonesian already under Indonesian Jokowi President Jokowi already established 5 battalions in this area, and they continue to make operation on this area. So I think the situation is very bad in West Papua. So what PPT become a platform for the people, for the victims of the people like us in West Papua is very powerful for us, and we appreciate on that. And I hope that through this PPT we can make awareness more and more to the international community, so that I think the PPT can become our voice to say to the international that this is our emergency zone. This is we need emergency action for the people of Papua.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. I think it's very important that you were able to attend the tribunal itself, no, to debunk the claims of the Indonesian government and the foreign corporations operating in West Papua as far as the impacts. I'd like to get back on the issue on ecocide and genocide, maybe together with Samira, but I'd like to hear from Femia on her testimony in the IPT. Femia? Unmute, Femia. Okay.
Okay, magandang umaga sa ating lahat, mga kasama na mula sa iba't ibang bansa at sa pakiho nating pakikibaka para sa ating karapatan sa sariling pagpapasya. Magandang umaga ulit. Ako si Euphemia Kulyamat, isang manubo mula sa Mindanao. At ako ang ina ni Jeveline Kulyamat na ayon sa mga Armed Forces of the Philippines, pinaslang si Jebelin noong alas 4 ng hapon noong November 28, 2020, no, sa barangay San Isidro, Marihatag, Surigao del Sur. No. Pinaslang siya sa hindi pinakilalang pwersa ng 3rd Special Forces Battalion ng Philippine Army na pinangungunahan ni Lieutenant Colonel Joey Baybayan. Nalaman ko na lang ito sa pamamagitan ng social media, sa Twitter ng Philippine Star, sa Manila Bulletin at sa Philippine News Agency. At sa aking nakitang larawan ay masasabi ko na walang awa at walang galang na ipinarada ng mga militar ang bangkay ni Jebelin. At sinabi nila na napatay daw ang aking anak sa engkwentro ng militar laban sa mga NPA. At para patutuhanan ito, inayos ng militar ang bangkay ni Jebelin at sadyang ipinahawak at ipinatong ang baril, no, sa dibdib niya. Ginawa siyang tropiyo na napanalunan ng mga sundalong nakaherera sa background na may hawak na bandera ng CPP, NPA, NDF at kasama ang di umano'y nasamsam na mga armas at kagamitan ng NPA. Dito nakahandusay siya na walang hawak na baril. Mahal ko ang aking anak. Kaya walang kasing bigat ang aking dalamhati nang nalaman ko na siya ay napaslang. Nilapaslangan ng mga militar ang bangkay ni Jebelin. Hindi nila kinilala ang kanyang karapatan at ang kasagrado ng buhay ng tao. At ang paglapastangan sa kanya ay labag sa batas ng digma at sa pangdaigdigang makataong batas. Hindi ko siya kailanman ikinahiya o ikinatakot. Mabait siya. Wala siyang ibang hangad kundi matulungan ang mga lumad sa mga nang-aapi sa amin. Hindi madali sa isang ina ang mawalay sa anak na sumali sa ibang uri ng pakikibaka. Hindi ako ang nagtulak sa kanya at hindi rin ang mga organisasyon. Ang nagtulak sa kanya na lumaban ay ang kanyang nakagisnang pambubusabos sa buhay ng mga lumad laban sa mga nang-aapi sa amin. Ang nagtulak sa kanya ay ang nakagisnan niyang palagiang militarisasyon sa aming komunidad at ang pamamaslang sa aming mga kababayan at ang malubha at patuloy pang lumulubhang kahirapan sa aming lugar. Lumaban siya dahil sa hulok na sistemang ito. Kaya nagpasya akong igalang ang kanyang personal na desisyon. Bilang mga katutubo na ang tanging hangad namin ay maitaguyod ang aming karapatan sa lupang ninuno at sariling pagpapasya para mapaunlarin ang aming komunidad na hindi sinisira ang kalikasan. Ngunit sa ngalan ng insurhensiyang kampanya ng US na ipinatutupad din ng gobyerno sa Pilipinas. Kaming mga katutubo ang pangunahing biktima sa paglabag sa karapatang pantao at sa pandaigdigang makataong batas. Kaya, para sa amin, mahalaga ang tribunal, yung People's Tribunal na ito, dahil hindi lamang sa mga hurado namin maibahagi, no?
Not only to present the truth to the jurors, but to spread it globally. And it signifies that there is nothing good that can come about in the justice system in the Philippines. Based on my own personal observation, the tribunal's decision is not based on who wins or who loses, but on what is, but based on what is right and what is wrong. Those who are right will win and those who are wrong will lose. As such, long as exploitation, repression, and oppression continue, along with the disregard for human life, continuing destruction of nature and environment, continuing hunger and poverty, we believe that there can be no peace in our country and even in the world. This is my testimony, and thank you very much.
Probably one last two questions for Papang and maybe Peter, or maybe Evie or Samira can also answer. While it's true that the People's Tribunal will be, its validity, its justness will be based on the participation and engagement of the peoples themselves who are victims of genocide, ecocide, and violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. But at the same time, both the governments of Indonesia and the Philippines and the US, and probably even corporations operating in the Philippines, would simply dismiss and ignore the indictment and the verdict itself, saying that either these tribunals do not hold water, etc. What can you say about this opinion or statement by both both governments? And maybe you can also walk us through the process of the tribunal to show that, you know, it's not simply what they say, fake courts or a court that didn't have any process. Maybe it's also important for the public to know the process that we did in both tribunals that will show its validity and justness. So maybe Papang?
Thank you, Beverly. I think I'm not surprised that the government would deny the judgment finding recommendation coming from the PPT on West Papua, and they reiterated their position, I think, in the last weeks during a side event in the UN Human Rights Council. There's a discussion on this PPT on West Papua, and one of the permanent mission of Indonesia came to that side event to reiterate it that they didn't recognize the jurisdiction of the court And all the judgment, of course, didn't binding the Indonesian government. But actually, the findings of the PPT echoes the other recommendation made by various UN human rights mechanisms that Indonesia participated in. Indonesia is still a member of the UN Human Rights Council, for instance. And recently, in early 2024, there were 2 review sessions under the Committee on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights and the Committee on Human Rights. So it's the twin covenants. And they provided a recommendation similar to the PPT, that Indonesia should adhere to the indigenous people rights, including the element of free of prior informed consent in all economic developments. And they also concern in particular the situation of freedom of expression and peaceful assembly and association in West Papua, that they put it under one of the CCPR put it under one of the priority issues that Indonesia should respond in the next 2 years. And then there's a recommendation that Indonesia should pass a draft law on indigenous people rights based on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. But it seems that all these recommendations that should be legally binding on Indonesia, because we already, the state parties to these twin covenants, they don't think will implement the recommendations. And then one commitment coming from our current president back in 2018, when he met with the High Commissioner on Human Rights, then was the Prince Zaid from Jordan, that Indonesia would welcome any OHCHR visit to West Papua. And up until now, they haven't signaled, even a signal to invite these important missions. And we will have a new president in the next 10 days. So I don't think Indonesia would listen to the court, as well as other recommendation from the official human rights mechanism that Indonesia adhere to. The last report on the indigenous people rights under the CERT, the Committee on the Elimination of All Racial Discrimination, the last report was 2006. Although the committee already invited Indonesia to submit another report, but it's now almost 18 years that Indonesia also do not signal that they would participate in the review session. So I'm not surprised with the response of Indonesia. Yeah.
Okay. But I understand that this will also be, we can use the results of the PPT to further our engagement in traditional UN mechanisms. In other words, it will also probably enhance the process at the UN. Peter or Samira, anything to add on that?
Samira, go ahead. Yeah.
Sure, just really quickly, the only thing that I would add is just to highlight that I think what's important to pay attention to is that in the responses from both governments, there's also an admission. So these fake courts with no merit are people's courts. And so what they're really clearly saying on the world stage is that they don't care about the voice of the people. Yeah.
Okay, so the response in itself is a recognition of how powerful the people's tribunals are. Okay, thank you very much, Samira. Peter?
Yes, I really support what Samira just said, and also echoing what Pabang said. The Marcos regime might just ignore or try to downplay, but they have to respond. So even if it's a negative, it's an engagement, and the international community especially in those forums such as the UN Human Rights Council, can see the drama of it. And really, the last time I was privileged to be there in 2022 at the end of the year, and the actual dynamic of the council was isolation and embarrassment of the Philippine delegation, and really affirmation of the people's voice, which was expressed there. And I do think that it's a very long struggle, and we have to be very determined to maintain our pressure and find ever new tactics to use. But we are making progress here. The Human Rights Council and also the International Criminal Court are actually alive to the situation in the Philippines because of all of the years of protests from the Filipino people and their international supporters. So, of course, I'm extremely frustrated that the ICC hasn't advanced further, but it could happen anytime. And of course, that would, again, transform the whole international perspective on the Philippines. I think, so just on the actual process of the tribunal, it's very much like a court. In fact, it's very, very loyal to the correct processes to establish credible evidence and legally binding or legally well-founded findings. So in the global judicial community, we have already won the argument. It's a matter of advancing it into the political and other social dimensions more. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So I understand that the process, that a copy of the indictment was also provided to both governments, giving them enough time to respond. But it seems that they ignored it. So a copy of the indictment for both the tribunals are available online. So for those who haven't read it yet, I suggest that you read the indictment and the findings, because it will also outline the process and the testimonies provided by the people. Going back to you, Victor, one of the things that West Papua and the Philippines share is the existence of national liberation movements. And I think in both People's Tribunal, they highlighted that to rebel is a matter of right under international humanitarian law. In cases of extreme oppression, exploitation, and repression, people have the right to rebel. And to rebel takes different forms. No? So I think what is also, what can you say about being the liberation movement or the people's struggles in West Papua and the Philippines being put into the fore, not highlighting not only human rights but also international humanitarian law. And I see that in the indictment on the case of West Papua, the issue of ecocide was really stressed. Can you give us probably a minute or so to discuss the role of corporations in West Papua, not only on environmental destruction, but also in regards to violation of human rights? Or probably my question is there a link between this corporate foreign business interests in West Papua and this the extreme repression that the state of Indonesia is conducting in West Papua?
Yes, the forest is our home. The forest is our home. The forest is our supermarket. The forest is our hospital. So we will defend our land. We will defend our forests. We will defend our peoples in West Papua. So all the means, we will do all the means of the struggles, even the non-struggle, even non-violence. Our rebellion is only way for the people of West Papua. There is no any room of democracy in West Papua. Even we use non-violent method in West Papua. I led many peaceful demonstrations in front of my people. Thousands of people go down the road, but there is no any room for democracy. The Indonesians still close their eyes, still close their. They don't want to hear our voice. There is no room for our political expression. There is no any peaceful approachment by the government of Indonesia. Too many solutions we ask Indonesian to talk with Indonesian peacefully. Even our combatant, our liberation army already asked Indonesian to go for peace talk. But again, the Indonesian military forces still increase their operation in West Papua. The military is a business of military in West Papua. The infestation, the settler colonialism in West Papua is huge in West Papua. The West Papua already divided into six provinces in West Papua, and then it will become the more dangerous for the people, for the indigenous people also, for our forests in West Papua. So I think for me, for the civilians movement like me, I hopeless to use the civil movement. Yes, we will use any platform internationally like PPT or solidarity like the Philippine, like an IPMSDL, also Merdeka Network, who have established by all comrades in the Philippines. We will use all the platform to help us to make communication with the people in outside. So I think that the truth cannot be ignored wherever. Yes, we know that all the sectors in West Papua are dominated by the migrant in West Papua. Under the Indonesian security forces, they control everything in West Papua, but we will organize all the sectors to stand up, to advocate by themselves. So today there are huge situation that hegemonically people of West Papua through the Indonesian policy, like not only policy but through the Indonesian election in West Papua, they influence all the people's mind. So this is our need in West Papuan struggle to decolonize people of mind. We need people to lead by themselves and struggle, join with the political body, that there is no any, we need to fight for independence back in West Papua. Sectorally, we are fighting, but there is no any solution for the people of West Papua. But I think politically we are fighting. We will unite and we will fight in West Papua. That's the only solution, definitely. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the situation will not change if we do not fight for change. We're already 1 hour, and I think there are some questions that are being posted online. But I'd like to ask one last question before we go to the question that has been posted in the chat. Maybe Evie or anybody. What are the lessons that we learn in engaging or organizing our own tribunal? Is there something that can be shared from these two tribunals, especially that we share common issues and common situations? Are there?
I can start. I think the first thing that struck me in the IPT was the participation of the Filipino people in the audience, as well then as the focus on the witnesses. So the whole effect, I think, was extremely heartening and self-affirming about their life struggle, that the case was presented in clear, forceful, and compelling, legally compelling ways. It's very, very important that people can see their struggle is right, that they stand with humanity, not alone. It's maybe a little intangible, but in a way, I think that was the most valuable thing in the IPT experience. And then all the other things we've talked about, you know, the impact, especially on the judicial community and the global discussion about what's happening in our countries, that you know, we cannot underestimate its importance. And then deeper in our own movements, you know, there's always education to do, and we've now got a lot more tools to use, and we are trying, like today, to do that. There you go, Bev. You're on mute, Beverly.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Evie, if considering that question, do you think it will also be useful to share this the judgment or the verdict with other regional mechanisms such as the ASEAN? There's another question.
Oh, that's another question in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can answer that very deeply on the ASEAN, if it will be useful to bring it there. But I think definitely wherever we can in every avenue, it is something that we should bring along, because there is this huge amount of evidence that has been presented that we can use. And it's all available, especially also for the IPT. It's online, the different testimonies, the reports, and all the evidence is there. So really also emphasizing what Peter was saying, that we have this huge amount of extra tools that we can use to also explain to people what is happening, what is the situation that's currently happening, and to support us in that work. And I think just also to add, I think for the IPT, it was also very important that it was able to also highlight the voice of the National Democratic Movement, that it didn't shy away from the reality of the armed struggle as well that is happening there, no? So it was very important that it affirmed that the revolutionary struggle is an armed conflict under international law, and so also making international humanitarian law applicable, and reasserting also the NDFP's belligerency status as a true representative of the Filipino people. And I think that's also something that we really still need to highlight more in conversations, because especially in mainstream media, this really remains underreported or even denied. The fact that the oppressed peoples of the world have all the right to resist war and aggression, and have the right to struggle for self-determination, including by the means of armed struggle as recognized through international law. So I think we really need to see also the tribunal as not only another step in the pursuit of justice, but also really as that evidence highlighting that it is urgent and needed to continue to support the struggles of the Filipino people, of the West Papuan people, and of all oppressed peoples of the world.
Okay. I see your hand up, Papang.
Yeah, thank you, Beverly. For the ASEAN thing, I would like to add something, because I think a few years ago, we from the TAPOL approached one of the representatives from Indonesia of this ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission. She's really a good person. And Indonesia, they want to portray themselves as the leaders of the human rights affair in the region, and promoting like the peer review among the ASEAN countries. But on the other hand, Indonesia have our own domestic systematic human rights violations, and apparently they are very reluctant, and they do not want to open up any discussion at the regional level on the issue of West Papua. Among other issues, the other issues like LGBTIQ rights, of course, and ICHR itself, it's not from the strict human rights perspective, it's not a regional human rights body, because their lack of protection mandate, they cannot even receive complaint, allegations, or any communication from the affected communities affected by human rights violations. But of course, we try to push this mechanism to have a stronger mandate, but we are not very optimistic. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. I understand that even in ASEAN, they're quite strict on the issue of non-interference. And I chair the ASEAN Intergovernmental Committee on Human Rights actually has been criticized of having no teeth or function at all. And I agree with what Papang said. Samira, do you have anything to add? And what else can we do with the verdict? What's next from PPT?
Yeah. I just wanted to add really quickly. I had the honor of attending the IPT in Brussels before the PPT took place, and really was so inspired and took so many learnings from that. And I think something that really stayed with me from the IPT was a point that was made repeatedly about the importance and the vitalness of the people's record, and how this is something that will live forever and will never allow for our struggles to be forgotten. And so I think in terms of taking these verdicts that came out of people's tribunals, from our end and working with the PPT, and based on the meetings that we had in Geneva, the judgment is actually going to be supplied to a number of different special procedures offices, highlighting for each mandate what part of the judgment is relevant to them. And so that basically gives them the evidence to be able to take it up within their mandate and reach out and put pressure on the Indonesian government. And all of their previous communications with the Indonesian government are published online. And once the government responds, there are 60 days before they make those available online as well. So I think really just what the people have done, have put together like a very robust body of evidence that can then be used to deliver to all these higher institutions to say, here, we've essentially done the work. Here's all the evidence. Now use it within your mandate.
Okay, thank you very much, Samir. I think what is very inspiring about the tribunals is we are able to create spaces that are being denied. Like if we don't get it, we've seen how the domestic courts have worked, the limitations of the UN, but it has not stopped us from organizing some a process wherein the communities themselves, the victims themselves, are able to participate freely, without fear, and at the same time, the being able to put into practice what is often denied of us, the due process, or even being able to express ourselves clearly. I think that's something that the tribunal really brings into it. I think it's also a reflection of the advancement of the people's movement in both the Philippines and in West Papua to be able to organize this. And then the judges or the jurors are really composed of highly respected individuals, no? Not only because of their expertise, but also their engagement with the peoples of the Philippines and West Papua. So we look forward to really having this being popularized. I see that some Kakay from the Philippines has mentioned that if this can also be shared to the communities, hopefully we'll be able so that they can also use it in their domestic litigation that can be also be used. And I hear that some have already cited the IPT and PPT findings in their domestic cases. And there's one that, yes, the IPT, at least for the Philippines, was also given to the ICC in the same manner that the PPT has been given to several UN mandate holders. I've run out of questions, so unless there are other questions or things that you would like to add into or share, or maybe events, upcoming events that you would like others to participate in, everybody's free to do so. I don't see any hands up. So maybe let's go back to the panel and hear your last words. If there are things that you forgot to mention or anything, you can give you a minute or two. So we can start with Femnia. May gusto ka bang sabihin, ipaabot sa ating panel, sa lahat ng nandito bago natin isara ang forum?
Okay, para sa akin no, napakahalaga no na palagi nating mapag-usapan yung yung palagi nating mapag-usapan yung sa IPT dahil para sa amin bilang mga lumad sa Mindanao, mahalagang bagay ito dahil
Event. Because we cannot do this in the Philippines. We cannot share with the courts the situation of the UMAD, the sufferings that we endured under the hands of the military, enabled by imperialist blunders. Our reports are being dismissed. And it's right that the IPT is a platform where we can share our concerns from our experiences in our country, and we can show our continuing unity and solidarity and assert our right to bear arms. Because if the government's repression continues and if they won't listen to the truths that we share, where will we go? If there is no government that will hear our concern and will care for the well-being of its citizens. That's why we must continue to unite in the Philippines and even across the world to achieve genuine democracy and peace in our country. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, the last thing I'd just like to say, and to say thank you to the organizers, to Paul and Beverly, for really organizing this panel, because I think connecting these two struggles is so important when in our current world, the entire lifetimes and determination and intricacies of so many liberation struggles are disconnected by design. And I also just think that people's courts should and will continue to morph into a really integral part of a more just society, because it gives us a vision of kind of a different world and a semblance of justice where people are actually heard and listened to after so many years of being told that their pain and their struggles don't matter at all. So thank you, everyone.
I'll just say a few words, Beverly. So I really want to thank everybody, and I really appreciate those remarks from Samira then. So I just would say the peoples of West Papua and the Philippines are geographically close, but they are also close in that they suffer very extreme military and police violence, and also they have people's armies fighting for liberation. And it's clear now from what was said, the US is the main foreign power supporting the action of both the Manila and Jakarta governments. So the two peoples have very many common interests, and let's build on this experience we have here together today to have more solidarity and be part of the global struggles for liberation. Thank you.
I also very grateful that IPMSDL could organize this important event using the hook of the Alternative People's Court. And I hope there will be a follow-up. We could take all the judgment, relevant judgment, and probably regularly we could review whether there's a progress or also regress with the situation in the Philippines and West Papua to give more public awareness, but also to reflect to the social movement whether we should improve our work on improving the human rights situation in the region. Thank you, Beverly.
Liberation movements, right? And these national liberation movements in the Philippines and West Papua really show us that, and all the anti-imperialist people of the world, that resistance against imperialist powers remains strong and necessary. And these are also the countries that are the most heavily exploited by the imperialists, and that their struggles really become an important part of weakening that imperialist system. And also, as Peter mentioned already a bit, the US is really intensifying its presence in the Asia-Pacific region. So we can also expect already more human rights violations to occur. And the tribunal by itself cannot end the war crimes and the atrocities, but it's really a call for action and solidarity for all of us, especially also for those of us outside the Philippines and West Papua to take action and support their struggles in all arenas. So very important, I think, for us that it doesn't end here, but that we use it as a step to building stronger people-to-people solidarity. And as Samira also mentioned, to link these struggles together and to strengthen the international solidarity efforts. So thank you very much to all the organizers and to all the panelists, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. I have nothing more to add. You've said it all. You've said it well. I'll pass it on to Paul. Oh, Victor. I forgot to call you Victor? Oh my God.
Yeah, yes, everyone, I thank you very much. I thank you on behalf of my people of West Papua for every people who have involved in this PPT. I think lands grabbing, deforestation, militarization, genocide, and all human rights violations are state crime that we must confront with all the solidarity we can gather from every platform. So even the state turned to blind eyes. The message is clear. The world is watching, and the cries for the justice will not be silenced. So the tribunal strengthened the resolve of those in the fight for freedom for West Papua, for Philippines. So I thank you very much for your participation on the PPT and for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. So definitely this will not be the last of events online and on-site that IPMSDL and all of us will be organizing. We will be probably calling on for a consultation on how we will maximize upcoming events in the UN, and probably also for next year's mid-year review on the Universal Periodic Review. If I'm not mistaken, Indonesia and the Philippines will be up for review for next year. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that. And yes, a very important part of our fight is international solidarity, not only against local reaction or governments, but also highlighting the role of U.S. Imperialists in the further oppression of the peoples of West Papua and the Philippines. So long live the struggle of the peoples of the Philippines and West Papua. Long live international solidarity. Thank you very